Assassin's Creed Odyssey Discovery Tour. And of course today we're going to be delving into the Art, Religion and Myths tour, or set of tours. A little bit longer than the last one, but hopefully not too long. Let's just crack on, shall we? The Olympic Games. The Games! Once again, like I say, forgive me for bad pronunciation, and also if I have a coughing fit, because it's the same day as the last one. Yeah. Red Bull. When it's decarbonated, it tastes worse. Do, 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 do. Part of a sneezing fit as well, knowing me. Anyway, hello my lad, let's go.
Hail, friend, and welcome to Olympia, home of the Olympic Games.
Who are you?
My name is Barnabas, and I'm a ship captain.
We want Barnabas.
Though I've seen my share of combat, I mostly stick to trading these days. Well, trading and introducing visitors like you to wonderful sights like this. I've often dreamed of competing in the games. If my sight was better, my legs and arms were stronger, and my coin purse was fatter. But that is not what the gods want, so I continue making the best of the path they've laid out for me.
One way of looking at it.
We're standing in the main section of Olympia, where the Olympic Games themselves took place. Over the course of the festival, athletes competed against each other for prestige and glory to honor themselves and their cities. Enjoy your visit, friend. I'll check in when you're done to make sure you've...
And the guy's just like, yay! Repeating recycling animation, yay! We're all doing it, yay! Dear. Try not to cough during these bits.
The first day of the Olympic Festival began with a swearing-in ceremony for the participating athletes, trainers, and judges. The ceremony took place in front of the altar of Zeus Horkios, or Zeus of the Oath. Athletes would swear that they would follow the Olympic rules, while judges promised to be fair and unbiased. Then the competitions began, starting with a contest between heralds and trumpeters over who would have the privilege of announcing the games. The first day's athletic competitions consisted of wrestling, running, and boxing events for the youngest athletes, aged 12 to 18.
The competition of heralds and trumpeters was introduced to the Olympic Games in 396 BCE. The winners of the contest were chosen based on their loudness and clarity. So Brian Blessed would probably win. During the games, the trumpeters' main purpose was to demand the audience's attention while the herald announced the start of competitions. The heralds also proclaimed the names, fathers and hometowns of the victorious athletes during the final crowning ceremony. So basically, him, the son of, him, from here.
The second day began with a grand procession into the Hippodrome to celebrate the start of the popular equestrian events. The most anticipated and spectacular of these was the Quadriga, a 4-horse chariot race. Horse racing events were unique in that the winner was not the most skilled jockey, but the owner of the fastest horse or chariot. The Spartan princess Caniska once took advantage of this loophole to skirt the rule that women weren't allowed to compete, and earned 2 Olympic victories in the process. The rule also allowed for occasionally strange results, like in 416 BCE, when the statesman Alcibiades entered 7 chariots into a race and won 1st, 2nd, and 4th place. After the equestrian competitions, the 40,000 spectators migrated to the stadium to watch the pentathlon events. When the day's events were over, funeral rites were performed for the hero Pelops, the mythical founder of the Olympic Games. The night ended with a celebratory feast and a great parade in honor of the day's victors.
So essentially it was a massive piss-up. The Athenian statesman Alcibiades, who is the avatar I'm currently running around as, once bought and enrolled 7 chariots in a race. This turned out to be a good investment, as his purchases ended up winning 1st, 2nd and 4th place. Alcibiades' victory earned him an enormous feast and an equally enormous boost in popularity. He leveraged his popularity to wield considerable power over Athens' other politicians and would often reference his Olympic feat to get people to take his side in a variety of issues. You slept with my wife! Yeah, but I won at the Olympics. Alright then. You murdered my father! Yes, but I did win at the Olympics. This backfired spectacularly when Alcibiades convinced Athens to send a military expedition to Sicily. The expedition even ended in disaster, and still the beginning and the end of Athens' power. And of his! Yes, he's an interesting character. I mean, even in this game, he's very interesting. But, what happens to him is like, oh dear. Basically the idea of meteoric rise led to a massive smashdown later on.
Victory at the Olympic Games was one of the highest honors a mortal could achieve, and there were several ways to immortalize that honor. Some athletes had statues erected of themselves, while others commissioned poets to write them victory odes. Oral tradition was very important to the Greeks. These odes, called eponychia, were often composed by the finest poets in the land, such as Pindar, Simonides, and Bacchylides. They were usually played at banquets and celebrations attended by the triumphant athlete, or upon his departure from Olympia.
There he goes, walking out of here. Pindar, 518 BCE to 443 BCE, was a Greek poet who originally hailed from Thebes. He was very sought after in his time, and composed several odes for victorious athletes. Pindar's popularity earned him commissions all over Greece, from Sicily in the west all the way to Cyrene in North Africa. Many of the commissions were from members of the ruling aristocracy, such as Heron of Syracuse, for whom Pindar composed 4 odes. Ode to me. Look at them all dancing around like a bunch of drunken loons. Probably because they were drunk. Like me. Ah, the scrubs.
The pentathlon took place at the stadium on the 2nd day. As its name implies, it was made up of 5 events: discus throwing, javelin throwing, jumping, racing, and wrestling. There are several differences between the ancient version of events and their contemporary counterparts. For example, ancient long jumpers held weights in their hands to give them momentum to launch, since there was no run-up before the jump. Similarly, if an athlete won the first 3 events, they were immediately declared the winner, instead of being judged by their overall performance in all 5 events. Running events work the same as they do today, with the notable exception of all the athletes being nude. As for wrestling, competitors were not divided by weight class as they are today, but instead by age. The winner was the first to throw his opponent to the ground 3 times.
Earlier Olympic Games were only open to adult men. At the 37th Olympiad in 632 BCE, Pleiades, young boys, were welcome to compete in stadium races and wrestling, albeit in a separate category from the older competitors. The youngest competitor to ever win an Olympic event was Domestos of Messene, who won the Stadion race in 368 BCE at the age of 12. He continued to win well into adulthood, contradicting Aristotle's belief that a child athlete's success never carried over into adulthood. So, first professional athlete then? I mean, there was multiple professional athletes, but first one that did very well. Just imagine this 12-year-old kid just like, yeah!
Day 3 started with the most important event of the festival. A procession of Hellenodikai, ambassadors, competitors, and animals made their way to the great altar in front of the Temple of Zeus. The animals were then offered as the official sacrifice of the festival. The afternoon of Day 3 was dedicated to foot racing events. Running was the oldest event of the Games, and in fact was the only event at the first Olympics. The main race was called the Stadion, which was a sprint of around 180 meters. The winner was granted the honor of lending his name to the 4-year period between the Games. This period was known as the Olympiad. The 4 years that followed the first Games in 776 BCE were known as the Olympiad of Coroebus of Elis, the first Olympic champion. Once all the competitions were over, a public banquet was held in the Prytaneon to celebrate the day's victors.
Oh. Running events were categorized by length. The Stadion race was named after its unit of measurement. In Greece, a stadion was equal to 180 meters. Don't know what you'd call that today. 100-yard dash? I don't know. A Daedalus race was twice the distance of the Stadion, as runners had to run the length of the track, then run back. Its name was derived from the aulos, a flute whose V-shape matched the round trip of the race. Fair enough. The Dolichos was a long-distance race where competitors ran approximately 20 or 24 times the length of the Stadion. Since it was less exciting to watch than a shorter, fast-paced race, the Dolichos served as an opening event. Look at them running around. I'm bored now.
Day 4 was mainly for combat events. Wrestling matches were held in the morning, followed by boxing and pankration. Pankration was a no-holds-barred mix between wrestling and boxing. Almost all moves were permitted, except for biting, poking the eyes or mouth, and striking the genitals. The event was very popular.
Whatever you do, don't hit him in the balls.
The ultimate expression of strength and technique. Later on in the afternoon, there was a unique racing event called the Hoplitodromos, or race in armor. In this event, competitors wore a helmet and held a shield to simulate running in the battlefield.
The Hoplodromos originated in the 520 BCEs at the at the 65th Olympiad. It consisted of 25 even competitors running the same length as the Daedalus race while carrying bronze shields provided for them from the Temple of Zeus. The Hoplitodromos was emblematic of the close relationship in Greece between sports and war. Both shared qualities admired by the Greeks such as effort, endurance and courage. Look at him go with that shield, look at him go!
The Hellenodikai, or judges of the Greeks, were both the game's adjudicators and their organizers. They hailed from Elis, the city in charge of the sanctuary of Olympia, and new judges were elected each Olympiad. They had several responsibilities. Before the games started, they decided which athletes would be allowed to compete and supervise their training. They also drew lots to make the competition brackets. During the games themselves, they picked the winners and kept an eye out for foul play. For the latter, they were assisted by stick and whip-wielding umpires who stood near the athletes and punished them if they were caught cheating.
Athletes come to Olympia in pursuit of glory. I mean, why not? I just looked at the jar as well. But sometimes that pursuit was fatal. There was always a chance of death at the games, and some events like boxing and Kraton were extremely dangerous. Competitors were aware of this danger, and some even embraced it. In fact, before events, many athletes prayed for Zeus to grant them either victory or death. Arguably the most infamous death was that of Erechthon. A two-time Patrakion champion, Erechthon was looking to win a third title for himself in 564 BCE. He made it all the way to the final match, but then his opponent put him in a stranglehold. Desperate to escape, Erechthon kicked hard at his opponent's foot, dislocating it in the process. The pain caused the opponent to submit to the umpires, but at the same time, Erechthon tried twisting out of his grip. The movement snapped Archeon's neck and killed him. But since his opponent had submitted mere seconds before, Erechthon was still declared the victor. Oh, you snapped his neck. He still wins, though. As I say, because the thing behind it looks like he's just like, yes, that is an arse cheek right there, slap, slap. Like, look at your knee. And the guy there's like, yeah, look at his knee, yeah. I've seen far worse things on other Greek pots, believe me.
Victory in Olympia was one of the most prestigious honors in all of Greece. Not only would victors be showered in glory in their home city, but their names would be known across Greece. The temptation to glory led some athletes to break their oath to Zeus and cheat. This could be dangerous, as there were many possible punishments should cheaters be caught. They could be disqualified and fined, or, if they were caught cheating during a match, they would be beaten by nearby umpires. The most powerful deterrent of cheating, however, was shame. At the foot of Mount Kronios, and on the way to the stadium, were a group of bronze statues called Zanes, the plural of Zeus. These statues were inscribed with the names of the cheating athletes, how they cheated, and the fine that was imposed. The Zanes, which were funded by cheaters' fines, were strategically placed to be highly visible. Individuals or even entire cities could be found guilty of cheating.
It's one way of friggin' deterring it. Ambition sometimes led athletes to bribery. This was seen as extremely odious, as the game started with them swearing an oath to Zeus himself that they would follow the rules. Even so, corruption still found its way into the games. Both the boxer Epaulos of Thessaly and the Pancreastis... I'm going to go with that. The bloke, Callippius of Athens, paid other competitors to let them win. Hellenodicae would also be corrupt. Although indices trying to stop a cough and I couldn't do it. Although indices of them cheating were less common. For example, in 372 BCE, a judge was suspected even of corruption when he won 2 horse races, and as a consequence his right to buy horses and chariots was suspended. Again, one way to stop them. Oh, you cheated, did you? Well, you can't do anything ever again then? Kind of makes you think, was it worth cheating?
The Prytaneion was the administrative center of the cult of Olympia and the Olympic Games. The building housed the sanctuary's priests as well as the game's officials. It was also used to stage the grand banquet held on the evening of the third day to honor victors. It also had a sacred function. Its central chamber was the location of the Fire of Hestia, a sacred flame that burned day and night. This fire was used to light the other altars around the sanctuary. This practice may have partially inspired the modern tradition of carrying the Olympic torch.
Public and private banquets played different roles in Greek society. Private banquets were held for aristocrats to meet, discuss ideas, and display their wealth and power. Public banquets, on the other hand, were usually organised... I'm thinking if I did say the right word there. Anyway, by the state and throne for civics, religious or political reasons. They also helped reinforce a sense of unity and social order. The religious aspects of public banquets were reflected in their meals, which usually consisted of meat left over from an early animal sacrifice. And that boy there is tipping away the vomit? I don't know. He's pouring something into there. I'm assuming it's wine, refilling it. Still, it could be piss.
Hello again! I hope you enjoyed your visit.
I mean, it was alright.
Spectacular events and lavish banquets. The Olympic Games were a feast for the senses. I am certain even Zeus himself was entertained by the festivities. Now, is there anything else you'd like to do? Wonderful! Let the mental Olympics begin. Let's start with an easy one.
You say that.
Which notable woman won an event in the games? Correct! She won 2 equestrian events thanks to her savvy horse purchases. This next question is slightly more challenging. Which of the following is not a famous Greek poet? You are right! Thrasivas was a renowned Spartan general, and he didn't have time for rhymes and pretty words. Time for the final question. How many events were in the pentathlon? Yes! The Greek word for pende means 5.
I'm trying not to sneeze.
Had 5 events. Well done, my friend.
Don't worry, I'll turn away from the microphone if I do, but you'll probably still hear it because I sneeze quite loudly. Especially when it comes out of nowhere.
Very well. Safe travels, my friend.
I'm not particularly a fan of holding it in because it just hurts my nose. As in, like, you know, when you stop it from going off, it's like... ends up hurting myself even more. Anyway, to the next tour! School of Greece. Mosaic. I'm looking forward to that one, because look at that statue, it's awesome. Oh, the Greeks would do the thing, then they'd roll about and do the thing. Do 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 do.
Welcome to Athens, Wanderer. More specifically, welcome to the musical hub of the city, the Odeon. Sometimes, when the burdens of life begin to weigh heavy on my shoulders, I come here, close my eyes, and surrender myself to the music. It makes me
I've done that
feel
before.
like I'm a child again. My mother singing me to sleep with a gentle lullaby.
Music is a powerful thing.
The Odeon was where musicians came to share their songs.
Oh, that reminds me, I need to go to the Odeon.
Melodies played here caught
Watch
the
Spider-Man.
wind and drifted through the air, soothing the souls of Athenians.
I think that's what they called.
across-
Pardon me.
Come
That's what
find
they
me
called
when
this
your
cinema as
visit
that.
is complete, and we will talk about the things you've learned. See you soon, Wanderer.
Oh, great. Looks nice, doesn't it?
Music played an important part in almost every aspect of ancient Greek life, whether attending a public gathering, rubbing elbows at a dinner party, laying out offerings in a temple, or marching into battle. There was a song for everything. Aristotle even wrote that music increased the efficiency of laborers, and it was often played for rowers and field pickers to keep them working at a steady rhythm.
We've all sung songs while we were washing up or anything, so... For Greeks, the word music had a very broad definition. Musica techne, or musical art, technically included what we today considered to be music. It has also encompassed any art thought to have been inspired by the muses, including poetry, dance, comedy, tragedy, and epics. In fact, it was rare for things like poetry and plays to be performed without accompanying songs and dances. When it came to instruments, musicians favoured a flute called the aulos, the guitar-like kithara, and its smaller cousin the lyre, and the tymphanion, a hand drum that helped set and keep the music's tempo. So, basically, what we're looking at is... minus the flute, you could be looking at a rock band, basically. Female dancers were also known to use instruments called the kratolia, or clackers. Clackers as they call them. That's such a British, sounds like such a British name. Were almost always played in pairs, as their name implies, maybe because of clacking noises. So, castanets then, essentially, is what I'm thinking of when I hear clackers. I think that's what I used to call them as well as a kid. Because I used to have a set of castanets. Like crappy plastic ones from thingy about.
Musical contests, or agones, were originally only held during religious festivals. Over time, they became cultural events in their own right, and attracted musicians and spectators from all over the Greek world. For example, the Athenian Panathenea festival featured competitions for instrument playing and poetry recitation. The Dionysia festival included contests between groups of male singers to see who could best perform a dithyramb, a merry hymn in honor of the god Dionysus. While these contests could be attended by all, women weren't allowed to compete in them. In the early days of the competitions, winners only received a crown and an ego boost for their talents. But from the Hellenistic period onward, the rewards were upgraded to cash prizes.
Ooh,
These
nice.
prizes were large enough for musicians to make a fortune, especially if they moved from festival to festival.
Racking up the money as you go. Music played a large role in ancient education. Children were taught to play instruments by either public or private tutors, and would choose to learn the lyre, the aulos, or how to sing poetry. Those who sought careers as professional musicians received even more specialised training. The importance of music in education was a point of contention between two of the most famous philosophers of ancient Greece, Plato and Aristotle, sitting there going, "Should we have music? No. But we should. No." Plato encouraged the teaching of the kithara in his Protagoras, where he said that by learning the instrument, boys would become efficient in speech and action. Yeah. Meanwhile, Aristotle said in Politics that children should be forbidden from learning the aulos as part of their schooling, as the flute was too exciting an instrument. Oh shit, bro, that flute's just too exciting for me. I mean, isn't it like are you playing a double flute basically? So it is quite interesting actually. If it's the thing I'm thinking of, I'm gonna have a look. Ah, yeah, that's a classic. That is. Oh no, it's just a normal flute. 434 quid to get one. Fuck off. Oh no, there is one here. No, here we are. Double one, yeah. A Greek woodwind instrument depicted often in art. It's basically a double flute. So that's more interesting than a single flute. A recorder. It's like two little recorders. Not even little, they're fucking large.
The Odeon of Pericles was built sometime between the 440s and 430s BCE. The building was commissioned by Pericles for use in the Panathenea festival. The Odeon was also a venue for poetry readings, political rallies, and philosophical performances. According to ancient sources, the original design of the Odeon was inspired by the tent of the Persian king Xerxes, a spoil of war the Athenians salvaged after their decisive victory at Salamis in 480 BCE. The building's roof was made of timber from captured Persian ships. In this sense, the Odeon was both a triumphant symbol of Athens and an insult to their Persian enemies. This structure was considered one of the grandest architectural accomplishments of ancient Athens.
In ancient Greece, poem recitations were always accompanied by music and sometimes even dancing. These sung poems were performed by oidos, singers or rhapsodes, who specialised in epic poems. Rhapsodies? That's where you get rhapsody from. Essentially were held in high esteem, particularly if they were part of the Homeroidai, sons of Homer. All of them are the boy. Just imagine just a row of Barts now singing poetry. A group that hailed from the island of Chios, who claimed to be the descendants of the legendary Greek poet, if he even existed. Oidos and Rhapsodies were entrusted with maintaining the Greek tradition of oral storytelling, and in Athens they were required by law to perform Homeric poems at every panetheic event. But I've got this creative... No, you will read Homer! However, art on Greek vases depicts rhapsodies clad in cloaks and holding staffs, characteristic of travellers, implying that the singers toured the countryside as well. Just imagining a tour bus now. The Homerioids, way! Hello, Corinthia! Make some noise! Oi!
In ancient Greece, there was a type of music for almost any occasion. Complicated songs like hymns, paeans, and dithyrambs were meant for the ears of the gods, and as such were usually played during religious ceremonies and civic life. Meanwhile, a hymneus was a song performed at weddings, and a threnody accompanied funeral processions. For more merry occasions like symposia, scholia were the soundtrack of choice. However, drama was considered the epitome of artistic expression, since it combined songs with poetry, dance, acting, and costumes. Plays were thought to be the connection between mortals and gods, and the songs that accompanied them, especially those from the tragedies of Euripides, often became huge hits in the rest of Greece.
Hymns are metric compositions addressed to a god. They generally contain numerous lines praising the god and describing their deeds and benevolence, then end with a prayer. So, typical hymns that we know of. A paean is a specific type of hymn, usually addressed to Apollo, Artemis, Zeus, Dionysus, Asclepius, or Hygienia. According to Proclus, they are usually sung for the cessation of plagues and maladies. It's like, here, Asclepius, mate, could you just help? And Apollo, just stop. Since he was the god of plagues. Or was it Hermes that did that? Mind you, I am going off God of War knowledge, so we all know God of War's not quite accurate either with the mythology, but still good though. Anyway, dithrabs, on the other hand, were passionate celebratory songs linked with Dionysus, the god of wine. Dithrabs often kicked off the many religious... just kicked off. Many religious festivals celebrated in places like Delos, Delphi and Athens. In addition to the different genres of music, so there's like pop-punk dithrabs and heavy metal, there are also varied types of scales and intervals. These so-called harmonioi were named based on their ethnic origin. Dorian, Lydian, and Phrygian. Or Phrygian. Phrygian? They were designed to stir different types of emotion in the audience, as described in Aristotle's Politics. In the nature of the mere melodies there are differences, so that people, when hearing them, are affected differently and have not the same feelings in regard to each of them, but listen to some in a more mournful and restrained state. For instance, the mode called Mylloxidonian, to others in a softer state of mind, but in the midway state with the greatest composure to another, as the Dorian mode, a load of tune seems to act, while the Phrygian makes men enthusiastic. So basically, what, one's like miserable, one's kind of a nah, and then the other one's like, way, fun. So minor and major, and then the in-between. Talk to me.
Hello again. I trust your visit was worthwhile, and that learning of music was a feast for your mind. I know it was for mine. Is there anything else you'd like to do?
Quiz me!
Consider yourself an expert on music. Then let's put
nope,
your
because
knowledge
I can't read
to
it.
the test.
But I can follow it, and I like music, so go on.
Played at weddings.
Death Grab.
It's true that the Thiramvi were on the merrier side, but
Oh
they
yeah,
were
of course.
in honor of Dionysos, not newlywed. Try again.
You'd have figured they would, though.
A paean was a hymn to the gods. It was not sung.
You can tell these are the tools I've not done a lot of. I'm going to go with Hymenos.
Correct. A Imeneos was performed at weddings to wish the couple a happy and prosperous union. Let's move on to the second question. The Odeon of Pericles was modeled after spoils of war from which Athenian enemy? Correct. Not only was the design based on the tent of the Persian king Xerxes, but the building's roof was made of wood from captured Persian ships. Only one question remains. According to Aristotle, music was especially important to which group of people?
Everyone!
You are correct. Aristotle believed music improved certain motor skills, so it was played for field pickers and rowers to increase their work output. You definitely have an ear for music, Wanderer. I applaud you. Farewell, Wanderer. I hope you enjoyed the sweet sounds of the Odeon.
It was odious. You have unlocked the character of Athenian Man. Oh, now this one's going to be good. Do 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 do. The grunt of the Minotaur was a sound linked to the single moment before death. Like the snuffing of a flame, the damp breath blown from his snout could cloud the victim, and then it was all over. The Labyrinth of Lost Souls!
Welcome to Gnosos, traveler, where the Minotaur once prowled. Some say, if you listen closely, you can still hear echoes of the Minotaur's ferocious bellowing. Of course, it may only be a trick of the wind. Perhaps.
He's like, maybe it isn't.
Knossos was the seat of the old Minoan civilization, where King Minos once supposedly ruled. These ruins have been the backdrop for many important events in both history and mythology. Look for me when your visit is over, and we'll discuss what you've seen.
This palace, the largest of all palaces, was built in the 17th century BCE and is linked to the legend of King Minos. More than 30,000 square metres is made up of several rooms including around a central courtyard, which was, I think that was Minoan architecture in general.
The island of Crete was first settled around 8000 BCE. Over time, significant towns and maritime trade began to develop. Palaces were built, destroyed, and then rebuilt, culminating in what archaeologists call the Neopalatial period, which began around 1700 BCE. This period lasted for over 300 years and is considered the golden age of Minoan civilization. The largest palace of this period was located in Knossos and featured maze-like complexes of workshops, temples, courts, throne rooms, and living areas, as well as paved roads and advanced plumbing and draining. Trade and external relations were important to the Minoans, and their networks extended across the eastern Mediterranean. As a result, the people of Crete and the lands they traded with often influenced each other and exchanged ideas, usually through peaceful interactions instead of military conflict.
That's a nice image. Just artist rendition of what it might look like. Arthur John Evans was an archaeologist known for his excavations of Knossos from 1900 to 1931. He was so dedicated to his work at the site that he missed his father's funeral to preside over excavations of Minos' palace. Arthur Evans named the Minoan civilization after King Minos, but it is unknown what the Minoans called themselves. That's a good question. We don't know what they're just blokes. We call ourselves just blokes. Demon goat.
The settlement of Knossos was established as early as the 7th millennium BCE. Today, one of the site's most notable landmarks is the palace ruins, located on the Kafala hill. The ruins are split into two phases: the old palace, which has been poorly preserved, and the new palace. The new palace of Knossos had a surface area of approximately 13,000 square meters, making it the largest Minoan palace. Its focal point was a central court, which was probably used for ceremonial activities. The Minoan palace centers collapsed when Crete was overrun and conquered by a Mycenaean invasion from mainland Greece. However, the date of the final destruction of Knossos' palace is still unknown.
Arthur John Evans oversaw many architectural reconstructions of Knossos, or Knossos, however they pronounce it, with somewhat mixed results. On the negative side, Evans' restoration of the throne room prioritised how it supposedly looked in the late Bronze Age period, instead of representing the full spectrum of its history. Evans also overemphasised the Minoan identity of the site, leaving out the aspects of the Mycenaean culture that influenced Knossos' art and architecture. On the positive side, the site's reconstruction helped save many parts of the site that would have otherwise been lost. Moreover, while the restoration of some art and architecture was inaccurate, it did help invoke the elegance and skill of Minoan architects and painters. Sometimes it helps. Into the darkness we go.
During the new palace phase, the ground floor was dedicated to economic activities and contained large storage rooms. The residential quarters which notably had toilets, were located southeast of the central court, at the foot of the grand staircase. The palace was lavishly decorated with wall paintings, depicting things like bull-related sports and richly dressed women. Large stone horns of consecration, which were important Minoan religious symbols, hung prominently in the west court. Other notable parts of the palace include the theatrical area, which is believed to have served as a viewing space, the tripartite shrine, which was dedicated to the worship of an important Minoan deity historians refer to as the Mother Goddess, and the Piano Nobile, a grand space located on the palace's second floor.
One fresco excavated from Knossos in 1914, Ladies in Blue, has been reproduced for New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art. The copy reproduces and embellishes fragments that were burned or eroded on the original fresco. These are quite short, aren't they? I mean, I would love to go there and see them in person. Hopefully one of those I will be doing. Okay, we've already seen that one. Is that because we're heading down, down, down?
During his trips to Crete, archaeologist Arthur John Evans discovered several ancient tablets. They eventually led him to define the forms of Minoan writing known as Linear A and Linear B. The Minoans used these forms of writing for recording many things, including business transactions. For example, one clay tablet discovered at the Palace of Knossos was inscribed in Linear B script. The tablet detailed the transfer of coriander, often used in the perfume industry, between a man named Kyprios and another person named Twinon. The deciphering of tablets such as these has given historians great insight into many aspects of Minoan culture and society.
During the Middle and Late Minoan period, Minoans buried their dead in a terracotta coffin known as a larynx. Larnax? Larnax even, never mind me. Many Larnax were found buried in a cemetery to the north of the town that surrounded the palace of Norse. The coffins were shaped like bathtubs or chests, and were often elaborately painted with scenes that were probably chosen for their funerary significance. Just reading what the hell these things are in the background, because I thought that was one. Nice, the seals, nice. They were also sometimes buried alongside valuable grave offerings. It's possible the coffins had domestic uses as well, functioning as either bathtubs or storage chests. So essentially you're getting buried in a box, in an actual box. Or a bathtub. With probably another bathtub put on top. I don't know, I've never seen, what do they look like? Because that's what I thought that was. I thought, is that an actual... That's one of them. That does not look big at all. A terracotta larnax. On the this is the Metropolitan Museum. Is this? I'm assuming this is New York. Yeah, Minoan. It doesn't look that big. Either people were smaller back then, or they were crushed up, or burned and then put in there. Mind you, if it's used as a storage box as well, that looks like it looks like a storage box. It looks like the size of like a tea chest. Don't know what would you consider to be ooh, dark. Small trunk.
According to myth, the half-man, half-bull Minotaur was born after Queen Pasiphae slept with a bull sent by the gods as punishment upon her. This embarrassed King Minos, but he could not bring himself to kill the Minotaur.
It's a funny story.
Instead, he hid the monster in a labyrinth constructed by Daedalus.
And by a funny story. Depictions of bull leaping were prevalent throughout Minoan art, and bull leaping scenes are believed to have decorated the walls above ceremonial bull rings. Oh my god, no. However, the reasons for engaging in such an activity remains unknown. Because it's a load of fun? I don't know. Mythical bulls like the Minotaur played important roles in Minoan iconography. This is likely due to cattle being a vital asset in the Cretan economy, especially during the Bronze Age. Bull and cattle are even mentioned in various Linear B documents. And this cow is not impressed. Its eyes are like, what have you done? Oh, I see.
Daedalus was an important figure in Greek mythology, an ingenious inventor. He once became so jealous of his similarly clever nephew that he threw him from the top of the Athenian Acropolis. As a consequence, Daedalus was banished from Athens, though this did not prevent him from being able to get work. In Crete, he was hired by Queen Pasiphae to construct an artificial cowsuit that would allow her to seduce a bull she was particularly taken with due to a curse from the gods. Daedalus complied, and his invention helped facilitate the birth of the Minotaur. Afterwards, Minos conscripted Daedalus to build the labyrinth, presumably as penance for his role in creating the Minotaur. But perhaps the most well-known story about Daedalus involves his son, Icaros, who used wings built by his father and flew too close to the sun, thus plummeting into the sea.
Silly boy. Much of the story of Daedalus, as we know it, comes from the Roman poet Ovid. While older versions of the story exist in ancient Greek sources, they vary wildly in their telling, and often contradict each other when it comes to specific details. They really do. That's another thing we learned about. Well, I think I kind of knew that. Ovid's tends to be the one we know about, but then there are other versions of the story.
Sometime after the birth of the Minotaur, King Minos' son Androgeos was killed in Athens by the same bull that impregnated his mother. An infuriated Minos demanded that Athens send 7 of their noblest men and 7 of their most virtuous women to Knossos every year. After being carried to Crete aboard a ship with black sails,
it's legitimately down there, isn't it?
Men and women would then be cast into the labyrinth to be eaten by the Minotaur.
Right, oh yeah, I forgot. It's a boss fight in the game itself. Athens' donating of youthful men and women to Crete may have been based on a real payment of tribute to the Aegeans' dominant trading power in Bronze Age Greece. However, this is only a theory. A trade theory. There he is!
One of the Athenian youths chosen to be imprisoned in the labyrinth, Theseus, had enough of the morbid ritual. Before leaving Athens, he proclaimed he would kill the Minotaur, then return to his city on a ship flying white sails. Before entering the labyrinth, Theseus met King Minos' daughter, Ariadne, who fell madly in love with him. Ariadne provided
he's going to beat the giant bull man.
unravel to help him find his way back out of the maze. Armed with this thread, Theseus entered the labyrinth, killed the Minotaur, escaped the maze, and set sail for Athens with Ariadne by his
Doesn't he
side.
look friendly? After successfully killing the Minotaur, Theseus set sail for Athens with Ariadne, but stopped in Naxos for a long celebration. Due to the many hours of feasting and drinking, Ariadne fell asleep and forgot to return to Theseus' boat, which departed for Athens without her. In another version of the story, Theseus deliberately left Ariadne behind. When Theseus realised that what he'd done to Ariadne, he was so distraught that he forgot to change his ship's sails from black to white. I was just there like, oh no, I left my girlfriend behind. Better not change the sails though. Oh, my girlfriend's been left behind. When his father, King Aegeus, saw the ominous black sails on Theseus' ship, he presumed his son was dead and, fraught with grief, threw himself into the sea. And then Theseus was like, great, for the king now. Some say he might have done that deliberately as well. I think there's a version where he does say he did that deliberately.
I see you found your way through the maze of ruins. The Minoans played a large part in shaping Greek myths, but also in introducing influences from other places and cultures.
Phoenicians.
Now, what else would you like to do?
Maybe the Phoenicians.
You want to test yourself? Very well. Let's begin with a simple question. On which island was Knossos located?
Or it's got to be the Isle of Man.
Yes, Knossos was located on the island of Crete. Time for another question. Which hero killed the Minotaur?
Me. Heracles.
Correct. Theseus
I mean, he would have.
slew the Minotaur, then escaped the labyrinth thanks to some thread from Ariadne. Now for the last question. What did Daedalus build for Queen Pasiphae?
Cow suit.
Yes, Daedalus made Pasiphae a cowsuit, so she could seduce the bull she was cursed to love. Congratulations, traveler.
That's what I mean by interesting story. And we're not talking a cow suit as in like a cow onesie or anything. No, it's like a bronze bull that she could literally sit inside.
I hope you enjoyed exploring.
And the bull would fuck it. I mean, that was because, well, the version I've heard. So, Minos was gifted a bull by Poseidon with the whole idea that he would sacrifice it. I mean, he promised he would sacrifice it to Poseidon. And of course, he liked the bull so much, he didn't do that. So he tried to trick the god. Obviously, Poseidon being a smart motherfucker, and also, you don't, much like Zeus, you don't want to piss him off. He decided to place a curse on his wife to basically want to fuck the bull. And so she's there like, oh, this bull thing, oh. So she goes to Daedalus and she's like, seriously, make me this bull right now. I want its cock in my bum. He does. He makes her this. I think some versions of it differently. It was either a wooden one or it was a bronze one. I think the bronze one makes more sense. She made this bronze fucking cow, and she just sat in it and just the bull did its thing, and that's why she's got the Minotaur. It's very, very weird. I want for the bull. She got thirsty for that bull, if you know what I mean. Now what do we see? The theatre! Huh?
Welcome, wanderer, to one of the most prestigious places in Greece, the theatre.
It's nice, isn't it?
I tell you, but I think it's best to let the actors speak for themselves.
But then I'll be here all day.
The theatre was where audiences gathered to watch plays. They were the highest form of art in Greece, and people saw theatre as a symbol of complete harmony between the mortal world and the divine. When you're done taking in the sights and sounds, come see me, and we'll talk more. Until then, wanderer.
Theatre of the mind. Time to go to the theatre of the mind. Doo-loo-loo. Out of the way!
Theater is not just part of geek culture, but was a major part of Greek culture. In Athens, comedies and dramas originated from the dancing and singing performed by members of the cult of Dionysus. Between 536 and 533 BCE, theater's burgeoning importance in Athens was demonstrated when the responsibility of organizing tragedies was entrusted to the Archon, the highest-ranking magistrate in the city. From then on, theater grew rapidly in popularity, and soon a permanent space for performing and watching plays was built on the slope of the Acropolis. During the 5th century BCE, theater became intertwined with Athens' democracy. It often functioned as an echo chamber for political ideas, and in some cases, it could even influence public opinion. As a result, in the 4th century BCE, Plato coined the term theatrocracy to describe his city's politics.
Also obsessed with that theatre. Athenian dramatic even, never mind, I really can't read right now. Contents featured 3 types of drama: comedians, tragedies and raunchy satyr plays. These plays were not just dramatic stories, but complete performances accompanied by music, singing and dancing. These elements combined to form an exquisite tribute to the god Dionysus. Sadly, only a few plays from classical Athens have survived. Those are the famous tragedians Aeschylus, it's Aeschylus, I think he's spelled elsewhere, Sophocles and Euripides, and the work of the comic poet Aristophanes. Aeschylus was born 525 BCE. He was part of a wealthy noble family and was present at many battles, including the Battle of Marathon, the Battle of Salamis, and the Battle of Plataea. As a result, the Greco-Persian Wars heavily influenced his works as a playwright, and his first tragedy, The Persians, was a celebration of the Battle of Salamis. Sophocles was born a few years before the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE. He was a friend of Pericles and was an incredibly prolific writer, with over 120 plays in his lifetime, including Oedipus Rex, Ajax, and Electra. Euripides was the youngest of the 3 tragedians, born in 480 BC. Unlike Aeschylus and Sophocles, he came from a modest family, and though his plays were not as celebrated as the other 2, they became very successful after his death. He introduced many innovations to theatre, especially in the field of music. Aristophanes was a comic playwright. Though he is considered the father of comedy, little is known about his life. What is known is that he was a proponent of peace, and that his plays often referenced Athenian politics. The most frequent targets in his plays were Cleon, Euripides, Socrates, and the Sophists. Good old satire. Can't get enough of that satire.
Theatrical competitions were held in the sanctuary of Dionysus Eleutherius, god of wine and patron of drama. Dionysus was the son of Zeus and a mortal woman named Semele. Stories say that Zeus, who had fallen in love with Semele, appeared to her holding a lightning bolt in his hand. Semele was tragically struck dead by the lightning, but Zeus managed to save her unborn child, keeping the embryo in his thigh until it fully gestated.
As you do.
That's why the name Dionysus is sometimes thought to mean born twice. In Athens, theater was a part of the cult of Dionysus, and stage productions in the god's honor were held during festivals like the Linnea and the Great Dionysia.
The theatre of Dionysus as it exists today dates back to the 4th century BCE, when the statesman Lycurgus reorganised the sanctuary. It features a circular orchestra with a stone skene or stage in front of it. However, archaeologists believe that the original shape of the orchestra was a square. In the Hellenistic period, 67 marble thrones reserved the city officials were added around the orchestra. At the centre of this row was a seat meant for the priest of Dionysus. During the Roman period, a new stage was built in honour of both the god and the emperor Nero, because of course it was, and extra seats of honour were added around the edge of the orchestra. Well, Nero was such an amazing poet. And that's sarcasm if you couldn't guess.
In Athens, there were 3 festivals that honored Dionysus with drama performances: the rustic Dionysias, the Linnea, and the Great Dionysia. For the rustic Dionysia, each deme of Attica, organize their own Dionysiac procession. The parades were full of phallic songs, dances, and symbols meant to signify
Penis songs.
fertility. And participants wore drunkard masks and sang bawdy lyrics about the god. The Linnea was the oldest Dionysian festival. It was exclusively reserved for Greek citizens and mostly made up of comedy performances. Finally, the Great Dionysia was the most important festival. Taking place over several days, it began with a parade called a Phallophori, followed by a dithyramb contest, and ending with consecrated drama competitions.
From 450 BC onwards, the city of Athens gave poor citizens free theatre tickets. Where's mine? Which were valued at 2 obloi. So, what? 200 quid? I don't know what an obloi is in terms of their sort of... I'd imagine it's like 20 quid? I don't know much about money in terms of Greek money to sort of compare it. This initiative was provided for by a public fund called Theriokion, money for spectacles. Yes, please give us money for spectacles. And it consisted of the distribution of special tokens or symbolia. The purpose of Theriokion was... Jesus. Theriokion? That word may have been to make poor citizens make sure that poor citizens weren't denied access to the theatre. Again, where is this? The service was later extended to all citizens regardless of wealth. Numerous bronze tokens for Athens' theatre have been preserved. They resemble contemporary coins stamped with either the head of Athena, a lion, or an owl. On the reverse side, they feature letters from the Greek alphabet that correspond to different sections and seats of the auditorium. That's kind of cool. Can I see them, please? Ah! I've missed my cue! Ah!
The Great Dionysia was supervised by the head magistrate known as the Archon, who was assisted by 12 other magistrates. Among his duties, the Archon picked Korigoi, rich Athenian citizens responsible for providing the budget for rehearsals and performances. 2 days before the Dionysia, a ceremony called the Proagon took place where playwrights introduced their work. The Dionysia finally began in earnest with a procession to the god's temple, followed by sacrifices and a symposium. The next 2 days centered on dithyramb contests, while the final 4 days were dedicated to drama competitions. The contest's outcomes were decided by 10 judges, who were appointed at random by the Archon. The judges placed their votes in an urn, and 5 of the votes were randomly picked to determine the winner.
God, I keep getting this stuck in my throat. The Chorigia was an important and obligatory public service. Each year, several months before the Dionysia, the Archon would appoint 3 Kogore to fund tragedies and 3 to fund comedies. The appointed citizens were selected based entirely on how wealthy they were. So I wouldn't get picked then. The Chorigoi's duties were focused mainly on funding the chorus, specifically their recruitment, costuming and support. They also had to provide a rehearsal space. If a play won a dramatic contest, the Chorigo provided the victors with a sumptuous meal. Being a choragus granted opportunities for great prestige and public approval. When a play won a prize at the festival, its choragus was crowned alongside the playwright. Furthermore, the victorious choragus was expected to erect a monument near the theatre with an inscription celebrating his achievements. Oh, the egos you'd find there, then.
All Athenian stage actors were male, regardless of whether they were playing men or women. Tragedies originally featured only one actor performing alongside a chorus, eventually reaching a maximum of 4. Adding more roles opened up the opportunity for dramatic dialogue. During performances, they prepared themselves in the skene, a building that served as a backstage area, before emerging onto the proskenion, or stage. The skene could be painted to represent backdrops like palaces, temples, and tombs. Its roof was reserved for appearances by the gods. These gods could be moved around with a crane called a muck, which produced spectacular visual effects. On stage, actors wore masks and elaborate costumes. For tragedies, they were adorned with magnificent clothes. While for comedies, actors playing male characters wore hugely exaggerated phalluses, probably to maximize the laughs.
Look at my big dick. Actors in the 5th century BCE came, as far as we know, from theatrical families and were strictly divided between comedy and tragedy. For example, both Aeschylus and Euripides had at least one son who performed as a tragic actor. Similarly, Aristophanes, or Aristophanes as I keep saying, but people say it differently, probably had 6 offspring who became comic poets or actors. All of these actors and poets came from wealthy families, which was probably the norm at the time. Still kind of is a little bit. In the 4th century BCE, actors began to eclipse poets in popularity, becoming successful celebrities who travelled from city to city. One of the most popular destinations for actors was Macedon, or Macedon again, as King Philip II of Macedon was allegedly a big fan of drama. Well, he caused quite a bit, so it makes sense. My time!
The centerpiece of the theater was the orchestra, or dancing place. It was a large, circular area that hosted choral performances, religious rites, and, presumably, acting. Choruses were composed of men wearing masks and costumes. Any Athenian citizen could be choritai, as long as they were selected by the chorus director. Chorus members also served as the equivalent of a curtain, as their entrance and exit marked the beginning and end of the play. New costumes and masks were produced for the chorus for every new play, and they were often just as impressive and elaborate as the performances. For example, Aristophanes' comedies feature the chorus dressing as wasps, frogs, birds, clouds, and islands. One of his plays, The Knights, even had men riding other men dressed as horses.
Comic and tragic actors used to use their voice to deliver the words of the play, but they also relied on non-verbal communication and body language to perform their role. Just imagine them all just flipping the bird now. Actors had their own specific way of gesturing called ceremonioi, which means law of the hands. Yeah, I like to exercise my ceremonioi. Due to the large spaces they performed in, as well as the masks they wore, actors depended on broad movements and systematized gestures to clearly relay their emotions to the audience. The different postures or schemata that made up ceremonioi were taught in gymnasia, rhetoric schools and theatre schools. While most of the repertoire of gestures has been lost, historians have been able to reconstruct parts of ceremonioi by examining the art on some vases. That's one way of doing it.
Athens' Theatron, or performance space, could seat up to 17,000 people, nearly a tenth of the population of Attica. Its excellent acoustics made it ideal for drama, but it was also sometimes used for political meetings and parades. The theater was accessible to everybody. This did not mean that seating was free, though. The first rows were normally where priests and public officials sat, while the central part of the auditorium was reserved for ambassadors and guests of honor. There is also evidence that men and women sat separately. In general, theater audiences were emotional and noisy. During performances, they would shout, curse, and throw things depending on their mood, and their reactions were just as much a part of the experience as the acting.
Hecklers then. Mass load of hecklers. Originally a play's text and music was not meant to be preserved, and the play's performance was supposed to be a unique experience reserved for theatrical competitions. The text could be kept by the families of actors and authors, but otherwise it was not widely available. Over time, drama's increasing popularity beyond Attica made the re-performance of older plays more fashionable. Consequently, theatrical scripts started circulating more freely in the form of papyrus scrolls. The process of copying scripts was performed in a special workshop by illiterate scribes. The copies were not always perfect, and occasionally the play's text would be changed. These changes were still performed, and as a result of numerous versions of different plays were circulated through Athens between the 4th and 5th century BCE. It wasn't until the 4th century BCE that the Athenian orator Lycurgus implemented a decree that created a fixed canon for tragedies. So it sounds like Disney with Star Wars then, featuring final and definitive versions of the plays of Aeschylus, Sophocles and Euripides. I demand this is the canon! It's your fan canon, mate. It's a canon! It's still canon! Just imagining a load of like nerdy theatre people now just bickering over Sophocles' canon.
Hello again, Wanderer. I hope your visit was entertaining. Though all art forms were important in Greek culture, none had the same prestige as theatre, which provided a unique experience with every performance. Is there anything else you'd like to do?
Quiz!
Then let's begin.
Yes.
Who was Dionysos' mother?
A woman!
Correct! Unfortunately, Semele died before her son was born, but Zeus saved the unborn baby and raised him as a god. Next, another question. Which competition took place on the 2nd and 3rd days of the Great Dionysia? No, the drama contests were reserved for the final 4 days of the festival.
I was going to say a massive piss
Try
up,
again.
but I mean, I laugh if I'm correct.
Dionysos was the god of wine, so there's no doubt drinking occurred during the festival. But it wasn't limited to a paltry 2 days. Keep trying.
I'm trying!
Yes, the Thyrambi were hymns dedicated to Dionysos, and the Thyrambos contests were held on the 2nd and 3rd days of the festival. And finally, the last question. Which of the following is the oldest festival dedicated to Dionysos? You are correct. The Linnea was the oldest Dionysiac festival. Congratulations, Wanderer. You're a very studious theatre goer.
I'm also a critic, so
Then
beware.
I will leave you be. Farewell, Wanderer.
Gods and love. Gee, I wonder which one we're going to be talking about here. Which two? Oh god, not you. I thought we'd dodged you forever.
Hello, my friend. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Corinth's Temple of Aphrodite.
I don't want to know who you are!
It really is a lovely sight, isn't it? The temple, that is, not the ladies. Although they are also lovely. Lovely and lively and, I'm sorry, what were we talking about? In Greece, many love stories were told about the gods. How romantic.
Yeah, some of them weren't.
Heartwarming and happy. But they often ended in tears, tragedy, and a whole brood of illegitimate children.
You'll see in Blood of Zeus, yes?
Jesus!
I'm actually starting to watch that. It's a decent
this
anime.
tour will introduce you to some of these divine love stories, which may give you perspective on how the Greeks approached love in their own lives. Enjoy your visit, my friend. I'll come see you again when you finish the tour.
Much like Athens, Corinth had its own acropolis, called the Acrocorinth. The natural promontory provided an excellent view of the surrounding territory. It was also the home of several sanctuaries, allegedly constructed in the 6th century BCE. The Acrocorinth's most famous attraction was the Temple of Aphrodite. Pausanias describes it as having statues of Aphrodite, her son Eros, and the sun god Helios. According to Strabo, the temple's most distinguishing feature was its servants, who acted as sacred prostitutes. However, Strabo is the only source for this information, and it is still hotly debated to this day.
On the eve of the Battle of Salamis, the situation for the Greeks felt hopeless. After their loss at Thermopylae, the Persian king Xerxes' advance seemed unstoppable. Seeking solace in religion, the women of Corinth gathered at the temple of Aphrodite. According to the authors Pindar, Plutarch, and Athenaeus, the women prayed to the goddess, begging her for something, anything, to stop the Persian invasion. It seems their prayers were answered, and the Battle of Salamis ended with a glorious victory for the Greeks. It was so glorious!
Love played a large role in countless mythological stories. Zeus himself was not immune to the feeling, and fell for both mortals and other deities. Some myths centered on forbidden feelings that led to tragedy, such as Phaedra's love for her stepson Hippolytus. While marriage was prominent in mythology, it was usually presented as problematic. For example, Aphrodite frequently cheated on her husband Hephaestus, and Medea's resentment against her ex-husband Jason eventually drove her mad enough to murder her children. These less-than-ideal depictions reflected the Greeks' idea of marriage, which they viewed as a civic duty instead of a romantic union.
As you do. The Homeric hymn to Aphrodite, which dates back to the 7th or 6th century BCE, tells the story of the goddess succumbing to the charms of a mortal man named Anchises. But upon Aphrodite herself, Zeus cast sweet desire to be joined in love with a mortal man. To the end of that, very soon, not even she should be innocent of the mortal's love, lest laughter-loving Aphrodite should one day softly smile and say mockingly among all the gods that she had joined the gods in love with mortal women who bear sons of death to the deathless gods. Okay. And had mated the goddess with mortal men. And so he put in her heart sweet desire for Anchises, who at that time among the steep hills of many-fountained Ida was tending castle, and in shape was like the immortal gods. Therefore, when laughter-loving Aphrodite saw him, she loved him, and terribly desire seized her in her heart. Is that all? I'm not going to say what else happened? Apparently, according to the story that I heard, she appears to him in a disguised form, but Anchises is like, no, I know who you are, you're Aphrodite, and I'm not going to sleep with you, because he fears he's going to be emasculated, basically. At one point she does appear in her goddess form. I don't know if they actually do end up... No, she ends up... I think she does end up disguising herself, and he doesn't fall for it. No, he falls for it and sleeps with her, and then she appears to him in his goddess form, and he's like, oh shit, my dick's going to fall off. Or something like that, anyway. Can't recall what happened to the rest of it. think does she give birth to a son? I need to find the rest of the story.
The goddess Aphrodite was one of the mightiest Olympians and was typically associated with love, beauty, and sex. She was worshipped all across the ancient Mediterranean by men and women, both young and old. Her origins differ depending on the version of the story. The poet Hesiod says that she was born from the severed genitals of Uranus, while Homer's version of the myth names her as the daughter of Zeus and Dione. Aphrodite appeared regularly in mythological stories and had many mortal lovers. Her favorite was Adonis, a beautiful boy who died tragically in a hunting accident.
Quotation
Aphrodite
marks,
was
tragically.
devastated by his
Or
death,
accident, even.
so she created a cult called the Adonia to commemorate him.
Eros was the god of sexual love. Sexual love. According to ancient poets like Alcman, Ebikos, and Sappho, Sappho, he was young and beautiful, but also cunning, unpredictable, and cruel. The tragedian Euripides later introduced the concept that Eros wielded a bow and arrow that induced feelings of love in whoever they struck. So, you know, the whole Cupid bollocks. Eros was also a god of fertility and was allegedly celebrated in places like Thespiae, Athens, and Elis. On vases and in other art, he was usually depicted as winged and boyish, and was often represented alongside Aphrodite. He was also associated with women, domestic scenes, and weddings. Depending on the myth, he has had various different mothers, including, Eleuthia, Peneia, Iris, Aphrodite, and Gaia. Hesiod, meanwhile, believed Eros was a primeval god who emanated from chaos. That's one way of looking at it. So we're not going to talk about Apollo and how he basically tried to shag so many women, much like Zeus, except his was more rape. Though I think that was maybe more in Roman plays where he was a bit of a
I bet you were
rapist.
surprised by some of the stories you heard. For a bunch of immortal beings.
Or there's that famous story with Cassandra where he's like, yeah, I'll give you the gift of prophecy if you sleep with me. So she's like, oh yeah, go on then. Gives her the gift of prophecy, and then she refuses to sleep with him, so he decides to alter it, where she does have the gift of sight, but she's cursed to have no one believe what she says. I didn't hear a word of that.
Hesiod's version of the story said Aphrodite was the product of Uranus' chopped olives, so to speak. So no. Yes, it was Homer who said Aphrodite was a child of Zeus. On to the next question.
I probably wasn't listening. I was too
Medea
talking
was
about
married to which
something else.
legendary hero? Odysseus was married to Penelope. Try again.
Sorry, wrong one.
Pelops was a one-woman kind of man, but that woman was Hippodamia, not Medea. Keep trying.
I wasn't paying attention. Shut your face.
Medea was married to Iason, but after he
Iason?
someone else, she resented him so
Why is
much,
it still
she
spelled
murdered their
Jason?
children.
I know it's how they say it,
Let's
but
not talk about such depressing things. Instead, you can answer this last question.
I'll punch
What
you in
was
the
the
face.
name of Corinth's Acropolis?
Apocorinth.
Correct. The
Oh,
Acrocorinth has
Acrocorinth,
been
yeah.
home to many sanctuaries, as well as the famous Temple of Aphrodite. You passed the test. Congratulations, my intelligent friend.
I don't like you, Marcus. I really don't.
Normally, I don't let people go until they buy a souvenir. But for you, my friend, I'll make an exception.
Run away from me now before I punch you. Sophocles, not Sophocles. Anyway, that is the end of this tour section. I hope you've enjoyed. I mean, again, considering the length of time, I may do another one, because the next one, again, is like 5 tours long. But again, I'll take a break. I definitely need to eat this time. I didn't eat last time when I said I was going to take a break. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed, and I will see you next time. And I'll leave you with this nice view. Look at that, isn't that nice? Anyway, thank you for watching. Taddy bye.